standout night. He was able to get a lot of his points across and really speak to the American people about his vision for the country. I think Julian Castro also was able to get in an introduction of himself to a broader public and sort of point to some of the issues where he's different from the other candidates, specifically on immigration.
7th, it is exactly 4:01 a.m. in the East. Let the 2020 presidential debate season begin. It kicked off last night in Miami with dueling Democrats. The first batch of 10 candidates sharing the stage, and things got heated a few times, but it was mostly civil and driven by policy.
We've had the laws out there for a long time to be able to fight back. What's been missing is courage.
Pursue legislation so that women are paid equal pay for equal work in this country.
When people come to this country, they do not leave their human rights at the border.
For too long, our leaders have failed us, taking us from one regime change war to the next.
We are supposed to break up big corporations when they're not serving our democracy.
We need to make sure everyone has a living wage. And I've called for a doubling of the earned income tax credit, raising the minimum wage, and creating paid family leave.
I think plans are great, but I'm a governor, and we got to realize the people who brought us the weekend, unions, are going to bring us a long overdue raise in America.
We need an industrial policy saying we're going to dominate building electric vehicles. There's going to be 30 million made in the next 10 years. I want half of them made in the United States.
Giant corporations have exactly one loyalty, and that is to profits.
Donald Trump is simply wrong. He says wind turbines cause cancer. We know they cause jobs.
So, yes, I'm with Bernie on Medicare for all.
The farmer thinks they own Washington. Well, they don't own me.
I don't believe only in reproductive freedom. I believe in reproductive justice.
I just want to say there's 3 women up here that have fought pretty hard for a woman's right to choose. So I'll start with that.
Watching that image of Oscar and his daughter Valeria is heartbreaking. It should also piss us all off.
All the American citizens out there who feel you're falling behind, who feel the American dream's not working for you, the immigrants didn't do that to you.
We can do the things that are sensible. We can do the universal background checks. We can ban the weapons of war. But we can also double down on the research and find out what really works.
The mental health counselor in every single school in the United States, we need to start playing offense.
If you need a license to drive a car, you should need a license to buy and own a firearm.
Democratic Party would stop acting like the party of the elites and be the party of working people again and go into states, including red states, to convince people we're on their side.
We are the first generation to feel the sting of climate change, and we are the last that can do something about it.
We are not connecting to the working class people in the very states that I represent in Ohio, in the industrial Midwest. We've lost all connection.
Leaders as disparate as President Obama and President Trump have both said that they want to end U.S. involvement in Afghanistan.
We must be engaged in this. We must have our State Department engaged. We must have our military engaged to the extent they need to be. But the reality of it is this president doesn't even have people appointed in the State Department to deal with these things.
As a soldier, I will tell you that answer is unacceptable. We have to bring our troops home.
We must begin impeachment now so that we have the facts and the truth and we follow them as far as they go.
This is not the #1 issue the American people ask us about. It's not. They want to know what we're going to do for health care, how we're going to lower pharmaceutical prices, how we're going to build infrastructure, what we're going to do to create jobs in their communities.
And some Democrats want a marginal individual tax rate of 70% on the very highest earners, those making more than $10 million a year. Would you support that?
It's going to take all of us coming together to make sure that it does. Necesitamos incluir cada persona en el éxito de esta economía.
Again, that question was about the marginal tax rate, answered largely in Spanish by Beto O'Rourke, and what is really the viral moment of the night. Perhaps the most explosive moment of the night, though, was the clash of the Texans, Julian Castro and Beto O'Rourke, sparring over immigration and the border crisis. Castro wants to decriminalize crossing the border, making it a civil offense instead of a crime. That's a position O'Rourke opposes.
We would not build walls. We would not put kids in cages. In fact, we would spare no expense to reunite the families that have been separated already. And we would not criminally prosecute any family who is fleeing violence and persecution.
We would make some of us on this stage have called to end that section, to terminate it. Some, like Congressman O'Rourke, have not. And I want to challenge all of the candidates to do that. I just think it's a mistake, Bethel. I think it's a mistake.
You're looking at just one small part of this. I'm talking about a comprehensive rewrite of our immigration laws.
That's not true.
And if we do that, I don't think it's asking too much for people to follow our laws when they come to this country. I'm talking about millions of folks. A lot of folks that are coming are not seeking asylum. A lot of them are undocumented immigrants, right? And you said recently that the reason you didn't want to repeal Section 1325 was because you were concerned about human trafficking and drug trafficking. If we apprehend a known smuggler or drug trafficker, we're going to make sure that they are deported.
If you did your homework on this issue, you would know that we should repeal this section.
That's a lot of noise. In the spin room afterwards, O'Rourke said he thinks they both have the same goal and that Castro is actually misrepresenting his position. Let's talk about all this with Tolu Olorunipa, CNN political analyst, White House correspondent for The Washington Post.
Good morning.
Up very early for us, sir. It feels like you're catching an early flight out of Dulles this morning. Good to see you. Who to you, beyond Elizabeth Warren, who clearly is the front runner of that group, who to you won that night and suggested they can tangle with Donald Trump of the other 9?
Yeah, I think you have to look, as you pointed out earlier, at the data, the Google searches, the amount of time people spent talking, and you would definitely say that Senator Cory Booker did have a standout night. He was able to get a lot of his points across and really speak to the American people about his vision for the country. I think Julian Castro also was able to get in an introduction of himself to a broader public and sort of point to some of the issues where he's different from the other candidates, specifically on immigration. He's much more open to the idea of decriminalizing immigration from people who do not have documents coming over, that we shouldn't, he's basically saying we shouldn't be putting them in jail, we shouldn't be locking up so many people, we should have it as a civil infraction and have people come and if they're appealing for asylum, they should not be held in cages or in detention while that process plays out, but they should be let out. There's not a huge amount of difference in the party on that front. Obviously, the Republican side and the president are much more in favor of sort of the harsh punishments for people coming across. But there were some distinctions, and Castro was able to point those out during the debate last night.
Yeah, Cory Booker with the most airtime, so to speak, 10 minutes and 55 seconds. Beto O'Rourke came in second, just a few seconds behind that. Elizabeth Warren, 9 minutes and 17 seconds. She sort of dominated the first half of the debate, really, in part because some of the questions seemed to be about her policies and even asking other candidates on the stage about her policies. And there was a moment where she could stand out on health care. She came out last night and said that she would eliminate private insurance. Bill de Blasio was the other candidate on that stage. Healthcare is something that really drove the Democrats to, take back the House in the midterms. Yep. What about the healthcare angle on the debate last night?
Yeah, it was really fascinating to see all of the candidates have to really go on the record and say whether or not they would eliminate private insurance. Most of the candidates, 8 of them, said they would allow some form of private insurance to remain. But Elizabeth Warren, who has not fully come out and explained her full health care plan, came out yesterday and fully embraced Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All bill, which does eliminate private insurance. She embraced that proposal, even though Republicans are sort of salivating over the idea of this being a government health care takeover, something that they feel like they can campaign on, saying this is socialism and that Americans like their plans and they don't want to have to give them up for a government-run system. But she embraced it fully, and she gave a fulsome defense of the idea that the insurance companies are taking too much money out of the system and that we need to do something bold to make sure that health care is right for all Americans. And she's really leaning into that. So it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out and whether or not she is able to fully campaign on that and fully get the support of the American people, some of whom do like getting their health care plan through private insurance and do not want a massive change.
Yeah, and that will be debated further, but she probably just needed to survive in advance. Who among those other 9 hurt their chances last night?
Well, I would say that Representative O'Rourke had an opportunity to really sort of put out his vision. There were a number of situations where he was not able to answer a question directly about the tax rate, and he needed to have a breakout night in order to sort of move forward from the place he is in the polling. And I don't think you would say that he had that kind of night last night. The same thing with Senator Klobuchar. She didn't have a lot of unforced errors, but you wouldn't have said that she was the memorable candidate from last night who stood out on the stage. And based on where she is in the polling, you would expect that she would need that kind of night to move forward. So we'll have to see where things go from here. But I wouldn't say that either of those 2 candidates had the type of night that they would have wanted in terms of being able to move forward in the polls in the weeks ahead.
Yeah, Klobuchar probably learned that you need to deliver your zinger early. Her line of the night, which was, "I don't think we should conduct foreign policy in a bathrobe at 5 o'clock in the morning," really stepped on by time and Lester Holt moving on the conversation.
You know, Tolu, it's interesting because if Julian Castro and Cory Booker were sort of the breakaway players last night, they have basically today to capitalize on that, right? Because in 24 hours, we're going to be talking about a field that includes Biden and Sanders, Kamala Harris, Biden and Sanders and Buttigieg, Biden and Sanders on the top of the polls there. I mean, there's a whole new piece of analysis. How do they capitalize on their momentum today?
Well, it started in the very early hours of this morning. I was down in the spin room, and Senator Booker, and former Representative Castro were right there in the spin room talking to reporters, surrounded by a gaggle of reporters, really trying to capitalize on what they believe was a good night. And they have to continue that into the morning. The good thing for them about the fact that there are 2 nights of debates is that the spin room is open to all candidates. Last night we saw surrogates for some of the candidates who will be debating on Thursday or later today. We saw some of their surrogates out in the spin room talking to reporters, talking to the press, and trying to get their message across. And I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to see candidates from debate night 1 back in the spin room tonight, trying to get in the headlines and try to make sure that their message continues beyond the first night.
Yeah, Biden will soak up a lot of oxygen tonight. Tolu, the captain of Team No Sleep. We'll see you again in about 20 minutes. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.